In this short class we're going to look at problem identification and solution. In fact, this material arises elsewhere in videos in the series, so you may have encountered similar material elsewhere. The purpose of this short class, however, is to focus specifically on problem identification and solution. Now we're going to look at different steps in the resolution of the problem. So first of all, we start by identifying a problem. And identify a problem, or more specifically, a discrepancy between an existing and a desired state of affairs. So we're looking, in the context of planning, we're looking at where we are and where we want to be. And the difference between the two represents our problem, represents the issue that we must address. So we've identified the problem as arising as a gap between where we are and where we want to be. Next, we identify decision criteria. This is very important in resolving the problem. The decision maker needs criteria that will guide his or her decision. Putting it simply, we need to know what is good and what is bad as a solution here. We need to know how to achieve the outcome, the desired state of affairs, and we need to be able to judge between alternatives. So we need some sort of decision criteria. How do we measure the decision? How do we judge whether the decision is good or bad? The decision criteria, there might be several, in fact. So what we need to do is to allocate weights to the criteria. We need to give some priority. When we have identified the problem, we might identify 3 or 4 solutions. Well, we want to select the best one. So the best one will be the one that has the greatest weight. In other words, the one that is most important. This is the one we give priority to, and we reject the others. So if we have 2 or 3 solutions, one will be best, and we'll select the best one. We also develop alternatives. This requires the decision maker to list the viable alternatives that could resolve the problem. So we list out all the solutions. We know we're looking for the best one, but we list out all the alternatives. It's a wise practice, because if the one that's selected for unforeseen reasons fails, we want a fallback position. We want a plan B. We need to be able to solve the problem in a different direction, to solve it from other resources or by other means. So we have developed alternatives. And then we analyze all the alternatives. We analyze them to see what their requirements are and how effective they are as possible solutions. Next, we choose between the alternatives, and we use our decision criteria to help us select here. And not only do we identify the various possible solutions, as I said earlier, but we select the one which is best, the one which has the most weight. And then we implement the alternative. Having selected between the alternatives, it's necessary to implement the decision. This involves conveying the decision to those affected by it and getting their commitment to it. So, having selected the alternative, implement it, and that means communicating it to the various parts of the business to ensure that the business clearly understands the route that the business is going to take to resolve the problem. If the alternative is not implemented, then of course the whole exercise has been futile. The whole exercise has been a waste of time. The whole idea was to find a solution to the problem and implement it. So if there's no effort to implement, the whole exercise has been a waste of time. And it's also necessary to ensure that there's understanding amongst the staff that this alternative will lead to whatever the desired state is. Whatever the objective was, the objective may have been a higher rate of growth next year for the business, but whatever it is, this will lead to it. So that must be clearly communicated. So there is commitment to the selected course of action. And then it's necessary to evaluate the decision effectiveness. It's always necessary to go back later and try to measure how effective the solution was. Was it the best one after all, or were there unforeseen problems that have arisen and which detract from it as a solution? So go back and look at how well the solution works. If it's not working well, you may have to iterate the problem, iterate the whole procedure, I should say. Go back to the start and look for a new solution, or go back to one of the alternatives which was rejected at the earlier stage. But if it's not working, it clearly needs to be reviewed and alternatives again must be found. If it is working effectively, then there's no problem. Continue with the course of treatment, as doctors might say. So that's us setting out the identification of a problem and the solution of the problem. That's our interpretation of it. And the literature seems to be filled with this type of material and this type of structure. So there seems to be consensus on the way problems are approached in business. There are practical issues that I haven't discussed. For example, the problem may be reviewed by a team. The team may have issues. The selected solution may not be one person or one manager's responsibility. It may be by a team. It may have been selected by majority decision. There are lots of issues that we could get into, but just to keep it simple, that's all we're going to do on this topic at the moment. So I'm going to leave it at that and say thank you for watching.